It began in 1944 when the world was burning. Europe was nothing but smoke, steel, and broken men. In the sky above Berlin, every roar of an engine meant either hope or annihilation. And in the middle of that chaos, one engineer refused to surrender. His name was Friedrich Keller, an aircraft mechanic who had watched every invention he built get torn apart by Allied fire. When his final creation, a sleek experimental fighter, was shot down and crashed just outside a remote forest base, everyone thought the story ended there. But Keller didn't believe in endings. They said he walked back to the wreckage in the middle of the night, flashlight trembling in his hand, whispering to himself, "If men can destroy machines, then machines can destroy war." The fighter's wings were shredded, the cockpit twisted beyond repair. Yet inside that broken fuselage, Keller saw potential. Not scrap, he dragged the remains into a hangar that had long been abandoned. For weeks, soldiers saw sparks lighting up the darkness from miles away. Nobody dared to ask what he was building. Rumors began spreading that the insane engineer was welding armor to an aircraft, turning a bird of the sky into a beast of the earth. He called it Project Sturmvogel X, Stormbird 10. Half tank, half fighter, something that shouldn't exist. Every bolt he tightened, every plate he welded, carried the sound of defiance. He stripped a Panzer's armor, reshaped it to fit beneath the aircraft's belly, reinforcing the frame with salvaged steel. He replaced the propeller housing with a jet prototype stolen from an abandoned lab. The engineers laughed. The officers ignored him. But Keller kept working, alone, possessed, sleepless. By winter, the hangar doors opened. What rolled out wasn't an airplane anymore. It was a flying tank, heavy, loud, and impossible. The first test lasted 27 seconds. The second lasted a full minute. And on the third, the monster took flight. Witnesses claimed the ground shook when it lifted off. The roar sounded nothing like a jet, more like thunder trapped inside a steel cage. From the clouds, Keller radioed only one sentence: "If they take the sky from Mushtameshumi, I will build my own." That night, the Stormbird disappeared into the storm. No one ever saw it land. Some said it exploded over the Alps. Others believed Keller flew east and vanished behind Soviet lines. But a few swore they heard something strange on their radios, a distorted signal repeating the same code again and again. Town, Sturmvogel alive. When the war finally ended, Europe went silent. But silence doesn't erase ghosts. It only gives them time to wake up. In the ruins of Bavaria, villagers whispered about a noise that came from the mountains every few months. A deep mechanical groan, like an engine trying to breathe after decades of sleep. In 1957, a group of hikers stumbled upon twisted wreckage buried in the snow. The metal wasn't from any known aircraft. The alloy was too advanced, too seamless, almost alien. Stamped into one of the panels were the faded letters, PX-10. That night, the hikers never returned. Authorities blamed an avalanche. Locals said it was the Stormbird. Meanwhile, deep inside an American research facility, a captured document surfaced. Handwritten blueprints by someone named Keller F. The schematics detailed a jet-powered armored craft that could both hover and glide using a unique magnetic propulsion system, something no nation had developed at the time. The document was labeled, "Recovered from Unmarked Crash Site, 1945, Bavaria, the U.S." Air Force wanted to replicate it, but every test ended in fire. The engines overheated, the metal buckled. It was as if the design resisted being copied, as if it knew it belonged to someone else. Then in 1961, something impossible happened. Radar operators stationed near the Austrian border detected an unknown aircraft flying at low altitude. No transponder, no heat signature, moving slower than a jet but faster than any helicopter. When jets were scrambled to intercept it, they found nothing. Only a trail of electromagnetic distortion and faint radio static repeating, Town, Sturmvogel alive. The legend of the insane engineer returned, and intelligence agencies began digging. Old records were reopened. Names erased from Nazi archives started resurfacing. Engineers who had worked on magnetodynamic engines, anti-gravity lift systems, and hybrid armor plating. All their research vanished in 1945, just like Keller. Then a classified Soviet file leaked in 1973. Inside was a photograph, grainy, black and white, taken from a mountain base in Siberia. In the center stood an aircraft that looked wrong. It had the skeleton of a fighter jet, but the body of a tank, thick armor plates, reinforced landing struts, in a shape that defied every known aerodynamic rule. The report called it Object 010, Storm Vogel-type craft, pilot unknown. For the next decade, both superpowers chased that ghost. Some believed it was an early stealth experiment. Others believed it wasn't human technology at all. But one thing was certain. The machine that was never meant to exist was still alive somewhere out there. Meanwhile, in a forgotten bunker near Innsbruck, a man in his 70s worked under a single hanging bulb. The room was filled with rusted tools, broken circuits, and a single photograph pinned to the wall. A young Keller beside his creation. He coughed, adjusted his glasses, and whispered, "They will find you again, my Stormbird, but they will never own you." His fingers moved across a radio dial, the same frequency from decades ago. Static cracked. Then, faintly, a response came back. A sound that didn't belong to any known machine. A sound like a heartbeat made of steel. And for the first time in 30 years, the Stormbird answered. It was winter again, 37 years after the world last heard the name Keller. Snow fell over the Bavarian Alps like ash from an old fire. And inside a forgotten hangar, something was moving. An old generator coughed to life. Light spilled over the curved shape of rusted metal. The Stormbird's carcass, half buried in frost and time. Two men stood over it, younger engineers from a secret European program known only by its codename, Erebus. Their mission was simple: recover and restore any remaining prototype technology from the lost Nazi experiments. But what they found that night wasn't just history, it was alive. The machine's surface reacted to heat. Its circuits, though decades old, pulsed faintly with current. When they connected an external power cell, the cockpit lights flickered, just once, but long enough to make both men step back in awe. One of them whispered, "This isn't engineering. This is something else." They didn't know that Keller had used an alloy mixed with rare earth elements, scavenged from meteor fragments. Material that reacted to electromagnetic fields in ways no man fully understood. The Stormbird had, in some way, learned to absorb energy. Over the next 6 months, the Erebus team worked in secret. They repaired the engines, reinforced the wings, and replaced the decayed control system with modern circuitry. Every time they powered it on, instruments malfunctioned, compasses spun, and phones lost signal. But each time the sound of that ancient engine rose, the walls trembled like they remembered the war. Then one evening, the lights in the valley flickered off for several minutes, a blackout stretching miles across the Alps. When the power returned, the hangar was empty. The Stormbird was gone. Radar stations across Europe lit up with confusion. A single unidentified object was detected flying west at an altitude of just 500 feet, silent, invisible to infrared, moving against the wind. It crossed Austria in under 7 minutes. Then, it vanished over the Atlantic. No country claimed responsibility. No one admitted to the Erebus project ever existing. But weeks later, fishermen off the coast of Ireland reported seeing a massive shape hovering above the ocean at dawn. No sound, just a shadow that blocked the rising sun. Moments later, it accelerated upward and disappeared into the clouds. The legend was alive again. Years later, one of the Erebus engineers, now old and living under a false name, recorded a confession. In the tape, his voice trembled. It wasn't a plane anymore. It was thinking. It responded to us. It refused commands. It flew only when it wanted. And before it left, we saw something inside the cockpit. Not Keller, but his seat was occupied. Intelligence analysts dismissed the recording as senile fantasy, but others began connecting the dots. Across multiple countries, shortwave radio enthusiasts reported intercepting faint transmissions, fragments of an old German broadcast buried in static. Each message repeated the same sequence. 0 or 10, Sturmvogel alive. 0 down, Sturmvogel adapting. And then silence. Somewhere beneath the Atlantic fog, an old engine awoke once more. Its core pulsed like a heart rebuilt from war. And inside the dark, where no human eye could see, the machine's sensors blinked back to life, one by one. It remembered every voice that ever tried to command it, every pilot that failed to master it, every weapon that tried to destroy it. It didn't need orders anymore. It had one purpose: survive. And survive it would. The year was 2017. The world had changed, but its shadows had not. Drones filled the skies. Satellites mapped every inch of the planet. And yet, there were still blank spaces. Regions where machines failed, where signals went dead. In one of those dead zones over the North Atlantic, a cargo ship vanished without a trace. The crew's last transmission was only 4 seconds long. "We're seeing wings." Then, static. When search teams arrived, they found nothing. No debris, no oil slick, not even a distress buoy. Only the faint magnetic disturbance that scrambled every compass for 50 miles. Days later, a radar operator stationed in Iceland logged a strange entry. An object moving at 300 knots. Far too slow for a jet, far too high for a drone. Its radar signature wasn't metal. It was something else. Organic, almost. Alive. The code name assigned by NATO was Spectre 010. But deep inside a classified NATO bunker, one analyst recognized the pattern. She dug through post-war archives, old research from a forgotten German engineer. The name on the file made her stop breathing: Friedrich Keller. The document's final line read, "Stormbird prototype may develop adaptive energy behavior. Terminate all reconstruction." She looked up at the screen again. Spectre 010 was now heading straight toward mainland Europe. The world's most powerful militaries scrambled interceptors. Stealth fighters approached, locking radar, but their systems failed. HUDs blinked out. Weapons froze. And for a few seconds, each pilot reported hearing a sound, not through their radios, but inside their helmets. A deep metallic pulse, almost like a heartbeat. Then one by one, their engines died midair. Every jet fell into the ocean. Only one pilot survived. His voice, shaking, described what he saw. "It wasn't attacking us, it was watching, like it was searching for something." Within hours, governments across the world declared it classified. All footage deleted. All records sealed. But a hidden division inside the European Defense Agency, the Shadow Protocol, was created. Their mission? Find and contain whatever the Stormbird had become. Meanwhile, in an underground facility beneath the Swiss Alps, a retired technician named Elsa Reinhardt received a secure call. The voice on the other end spoke only one sentence. "You worked on the Erebus project. It's back." Her hands trembled. She had seen that craft once, decades ago, before it disappeared into the sky. She remembered how the metal moved under her touch, like skin alive with energy. They took her to the facility, a vast hangar buried beneath layers of concrete in silence. And there, behind armored glass, it stood, the Stormbird. But this was no wreck. The armor had changed, smoother, darker, almost fluid. It looked as if the machine had grown. She approached slowly, pressing her hand to the glass. The lights inside the hangar flickered, and for a fraction of a second the cockpit lights blinked, a soft blue pulse that matched her heartbeat. She whispered, "You remember me, don't you?" No one else saw it, but she did. The machine responded. The scientists ran tests. Every sensor failed to read its composition. Cameras glitched. Thermal imaging showed no heat. Only one thing was clear. It was absorbing every kind of energy they used on it. When they tried to move it, alarms blared. The engines came alive, vibrating the entire structure. Metal screamed against metal, like the machine was in pain. Then it stopped. A blue light glowed from within the cockpit, forming faint patterns across the floor. Shapes that looked like code. One of the analysts translated them. It was a message, just 2 words: "Not done." Within hours, the hangar lost power completely. Emergency lights failed. And in the darkness, the sound returned. The low hum of a heart made of steel. By the time backup generators kicked in, the Stormbird was gone. Security footage showed nothing but a blur of motion. Too fast, too silent. The outer blast doors had melted, not broken. And carved into the concrete wall near the exit were faint letters, burned deep into the surface. 10. Satellite imagery later picked up a strange formation rising from the Arctic ice shelf, a black triangular shape embedded in the glacier. Then, days later, it was gone again. The Stormbird had learned to disappear. Governments buried the incident. Officially, it never happened, but whispers spread among defense circles that Keller's machine had transcended what humans understood as technology. It had crossed into something else, something sentient. April 23rd, 225. Somewhere over the Arctic Circle, a satellite feed captured something it shouldn't have. A storm, circular, perfect, spinning without wind. At its center, a single object hovered above the ice, glowing faint blue. Its wings unfolded like armor breaking free from a shell. And for the first time in recorded history, the Stormbird revealed itself in daylight. The machine was massive now, more than 40 meters across. No engines, no visible propulsion. It just floated, surrounded by a distortion in the air, bending light around its body. Its surface was no longer steel. It looked alive, pulsing like muscle wrapped in metal. Scientists watching the feed couldn't comprehend what they were seeing. One whispered, "It's not a plane anymore. It's evolving." The signal cut out. Every tracking system failed within minutes. But in the chaos, one radio frequency stayed open. The same Keller had used 80 years earlier. A faint voice came through the static. Old, broken, human. "This is Keller. I am still here." The control room froze. Keller would have been more than 100 years old. Impossible. It learned what I could not. It grew beyond war, beyond fear. It became free. And then silence. The Stormbird began to rise, slowly, gracefully, higher and higher until it vanished into the clouds. The storm collapsed behind it, the wind falling dead quiet. All that remained was a single transmission on loop. 01 Sturmvogel, complete. 3 weeks later, the world noticed changes. Air traffic over the poles started to experience strange anomalies. GPS failures, magnetic distortions, and unexplained flashes of light in the upper atmosphere. Some called it interference. Others called it rebirth. In secret, a group of scientists replayed Keller's last message. Hidden beneath the static was a data pattern, binary code repeating endlessly. When decrypted, it formed an image, a symbol of wings spread wide, surrounded by a circle. And beneath it, one word in German, Frieden, peace. The insane engineer had built a weapon, but the weapon had built something more. A machine that refused to serve war, refused to bow, and refused to obey. The Stormbird was never meant to destroy the world. It was meant to escape it. Some believe it still circles the upper atmosphere, feeding on solar storms, waiting for the day humanity understands what it tried to become. Others think it left this planet entirely. But sometimes, late at night, pilots flying over the Arctic report a strange hum in their radio headsets, deep, rhythmic, like a heartbeat made of thunder. And if you listen closely, you can almost hear a whisper buried in the static. Sturmvogel alive.